what does the Father say to Jesus?
That's exactly what he said. You're my.
That's exactly what he says. He's not saying to Yom, he says it to Jesus.
Right.
You're my beloved son. And then what happens? I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven.
Yeah.
That's not talking about the primordial fall of Satan. It's talking about rage. He's furious. And now he's going to go find a way to kill him. Just like what happened in the other story. And that's exactly what happens.
Whoa.
But of course, the Bible flips it and inverts it, because when you kill this beloved son, it's going to be your undoing.
Welcome to the Spiritual Recon Podcast, where we talk about what is going on behind the enemy lines in the unseen realm, how the enemy is scheming against us, and what we can do to stand our ground.
That's right. We're going to interview today Doug Van Dorn. He is a pastor, he's a podcaster, theologian, and he's written lots of books, including Giants, Sons of the Gods. So, Doug, thank you so much for joining us today.
Just to kick us off, Doug, for those of you who may not be familiar with who you are, or this is the first time you're hearing your name, would you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you kind of fell down this rabbit hole of learning about the divine counsel, worldview, and stuff like that?
Yeah, well, thanks for guys for contacting me. And, you know, when you told me you were missionaries down in Dominican Republic, I said, well, of course I'll do this show. This is exactly the kind of people that I hope to be able to reach, and people that are in other cultural contexts, you know, quite different than the States, what you're probably dealing with, and the native peoples and stuff like that out there. So this is to be able to give people and help them frame theologically and biblically what I think, you know, you're able to see out there. That's why I do what I do.
Well,
so
we
I'm
appreciate
a pastor, just a guy from Broomfield, Colorado, and been pastoring the same church for 24 years or something like that.
Wow.
And yeah, how did I get into this stuff? It was totally on accident. I mean, it's God's providence, but it was nothing that I was looking for, anything like that. And in fact, there's a reason why, when you think of Heiser, then you read my book and you're like, oh, it kind of sounds the same. It's because I cut my teeth on him, just like most other people in this space did at one point. It just happened that I was a lot earlier with it.
Yeah.
So this would have been probably 2008, I guess. And I was preaching a sermon series on the book of Exodus, doing my regular nerdy study for it, using the internet, and came across a journal article on this really wild textual variant. And all that means for folks is that when you're doing textual criticism, sometimes you'll find that there's a word that's different in one copy of the Hebrew or whatever versus another copy. And so you get to try and figure out, well, what's the original? And this paper was on Deuteronomy 32:8 and a textual variant with the sons of God is what one reading says, and sons of Israel is what the other reading says. And I was like, Journal of Evangelical Theological Society, didn't know who the author was. And I just devoured the paper. I thought it was so interesting. And I had never, I don't even know why I read it or came across it, but it showed up and I thought that was interesting. And then I put it away and I just kind of thought that would be the end of it. And I was preaching a few weeks later, still in Exodus, came across another article that reminded me of that one. And I thought, well, there's no way this could be the same person, could it? So I went back and looked, and I'm like, it's the same guy. I got to find out who this person is.
Yeah.
And so it turned out that it was Mike Heiser, and he had a website. He had some early influence on Coast to Coast AM, of all things.
Okay.
That midnight, show with Art Bell back in the day and all the crazy stuff that they dealt with. And he was kind of the scholar that Art brought on many times. He was on that show a lot. And he happened to be writing what became the Unseen Realm. It was a very early version of it. And he was giving it away for free on his website.
Wow.
And so I downloaded it and I read it like twice in a week. I was just telling some people that book actually showed up on the internet. I think on Facebook Divine Counsel group or something. And people were wondering if anybody had ever read it. And I'm like, yeah, I read it. I even created an index for the thing.
Yeah.
I was so geeked out on it.
That's awesome.
So still have that index on my PDF copy of it. And, I'm kind of like you guys. Nobody talked about this stuff that's in his Unseen Realm book at all. And so I
Right.
didn't know anybody at all that I could even talk to about this. I didn't know any professors at my seminary that would know anything about it. One, but I wasn't a student of his. So I never really contacted him. And so I think I had probably written maybe one book by that point in time.
Yeah.
And so I had started to get used to writing, and I just decided to write about it. And so out came this book. I wanted to call it Michael and the Dragon, Why 2012 Doesn't Matter.
Oh, but
And
you did not
I
go
was
that
going
way.
to try and publish it by the time that it would have been timely, And then when I got done with it, I thought, well, I'm basically just plagiarized everything Heiser ever wrote.
Yeah.
So I never did anything with it. But that was how I started thinking about it.
Well, I wonder too
And
if you'd written that, then after 2012, maybe nobody would have read it too. So
Well, that
that's
was the
probably
whole
good.
point. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It would have lost its purpose.
Yeah.
But so let's see what happened after that. I looked at the book and I thought, there's a couple of things in here that I think I could actually explore that wouldn't be just plagiarizing him.
Yeah.
And so Giants was the first one. And then the Angel of the Lord was the second one that I ended up writing a book with a pastor friend of mine on that. And over the course of time and whatever, I actually ended up befriending Heiser, and he befriended me back.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
I had written a catechism on the unseen realm that I was just going to kind of publish for our church or whatever. And I decided, well, I wonder if I could get him to do a blurb for it, because I had some interaction on his website.
Yeah.
And he calls me right back and he goes, I would love to publish this thing.
Wow.
And so he ended up editing that Q&A companion. Has the same cover as his Unseen Realm, and that's how we got to be friends. We ended up doing a podcast called Paranormal together with a couple other people. And he was in my house and we were friends until he passed about 3 years ago, whenever it was.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, wow.
I've kind of, there's several of us that are doing this, Nate and Luke are doing it on
Right.
the Blurry Creatures podcast, but we're kind of trying to take up the torch and run with the work that he had done. And in my space, I'm a Reformed guy. And so I'm trying to bridge these gaps with people that never talk about this kind of stuff.
Right.
And
How did you
So-
even approach that? I guess because you're a pastor, how did you even approach that with your?
well, it was
just
good
a little
because
bit of a time?
I was just going through it myself. So it wasn't like I had been indoctrinated with this.
Right.
It was more me just thinking out loud about it. And I think I was in book of Daniel at the time on a Sunday night. And so I just started throwing these ideas out there and the people just ate it up.
Yeah.
Oh,
Because
awesome.
that book lends itself so readily to what we're talking about. In fact, you guys want to talk about the divine counsel, there's 2 or 3 chapters in that book that's exactly what you're looking
Oh, wow.
at if you don't know what to call it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, for those who really don't understand what we're talking about, can you just explain the term, divine counsel? Can you just explain that for those who don't really know anything about it?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So the place I take people first is Psalm 82. And in the ESV, it says, God has taken his place in the divine counsel. If you take the Net Bible, it'll say God has taken his place in the council of El. Now that's a more literal translation of it. Some of the other translations don't say that with that kind of direct language, but that's what it literally translates into, is the council of El. Now, El is a word that you find in the Old Testament for God many, 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 many times. It just means mighty. But the reason why it's such an interesting one is that El is also the high god of the Canaanite pantheon. Now, I don't want people to get a mistake here. It doesn't mean that the Bible conceives of El the same way that the Canaanites did. It's very different. So El for the Hebrews is the same as Yahweh. He's the creator and no one created him. He exists eternally. For a Canaanite, that wasn't true. You don't really have much information about him in what we have of their mythology. But we do know that he had a consort named Asherah, and you find her worship all over the books of the kings and stuff.
The Asherah poles,
And so-
stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, what we find in the Bible.
Yeah, absolutely. And so she's the consort who with him, they give birth to 70 sons of El in the Canaanite literature.
Oh, interesting.
And so actually that first paper I was telling you about where it talks about the sons of God, in that same verse, it talks about the number of the sons of God. And that number in all Jewish tradition is 70. Same number as the 70 sons of El and Asherah.
That's an awesome connection.
Does that also connection to the 70 nations in Deuteronomy, like
in
before the
Tower of
Babel?
Babel in Genesis? Yep, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
So in Moses' song there, he says, remember, ask your fathers, they'll tell you, remember long ago when God divided the nations according to the number of the sons of God.
Yeah.
And so it's like, for Moses, this was long ago. Well, Moses was already long ago. So what could that possibly be? And well, it refers to the table of nations in Genesis chapter 10. Yeah. And if you count them up, there's 70 of them. So that's where the tradition comes from. And so that was really what his paper was about. And Heiser wrote the paper, and he argues very, very persuasively that Sons of God was the original reading. We have it in the Septuagint. Right. We have it in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So this God has taken his place in the divine council then. Psalm 82 becomes a divine council scene. And the whole thing is about how he's going to judge what are called gods in that same verse. So God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. So he's going to be judging them. You read the next 3 or 4 verses, and it talks about what they haven't done right. They haven't given justice to the weak and fatherless, or maintained the right of the afflicted and destitute. They haven't rescued the weak and needy, and so on. People will go, well, gods can't do that. And I'm like, well, have you never read your Old Testament? Because this is exactly what God says he does for Israel. He sets up these laws that they're supposed to take care of these very people. And in my understanding of the God who does that, it's always the intercessor. It's the angel of the Lord, who is one of the sons of God in this very psalm, but he's not one of them. So that's the distinction, is that he has the same title as the Son of God, but he's, in the New Testament, he's the monogenes Son of God, the only begotten Son of God, the unique Son of God, the beloved Son of God. He's the one who created all the others. And so they might have the same title, but they're not the same in essence. He's distinct from them.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, at the end of Psalm 82, he ends up inheriting all the nations. But we can talk about that a little bit if you want to go into the direction of Jesus. But that kind of is kind of a side trail to the main topic that you want to go down.
So you're making like the connection between the angel of the Lord, I think you said that, and then Jesus.
Yeah.
Where the angel of the Lord shows up. You have a book, and I haven't been able to read that one yet, but you have a book called Angel of the Lord, right?
Yeah, and that's its main theme, is that Jesus is the God of the Israelites whom they interact with. So my thesis as a Christian is that the Trinity is in the Old Testament. We see the Trinity in the Old Testament, and the main character that Israel interacts with is the second person of the Trinity, just like it is in the New Testament when Jesus walks with us. He's the same person. So you'll have like Jude 5 will say, Jesus rescued a people out of Egypt. That's in the ESV. That's actually another textual variant, by the way, because a lot of them say the Lord rescued a people out of Egypt. And it's like, well, some of them say Jesus did. So which one is it?
Yeah.
And
is the evidence mostly towards Jesus? I mean, is the evidence?
No, the evidence is the other way.
Okay.
Well, it depends on what you mean by evidence.
Like the earliest manuscripts,
there's probably more manuscripts that say Lord, but Jesus is the much harder reading.
Okay.
And so that becomes the one that is almost certainly the original.
Got it. Wow.
Or, 1 Corinthians 10, Christ is the rock who's with Israel, right?
Yeah.
So, he's got lots of titles. Angel of the Lord is only one of the titles. There's a whole bunch of others, but that's the basic idea, is that he's the God of Israel. So you have Jacob, who will say in his blessing to Joseph, I think it is, in Genesis 48, verses 15 and 16, he'll say, the God, the angel. And they're all in parallel like that. And so the God is the one who rescued him, the one who gave him a covenant, the angel who is his shepherd, who's guided him all his days. So
Wow.
shepherd becomes a title for him. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Who's David talking about? Well, he knows who Jesus is. He wrote Psalm 110. The Lord said to my Lord. David has two lords. I mean, that's a classic New Testament verse about Jesus.
Yeah.
Wow. So the more that you dig into this, the more like the Bible makes sense.
Or even like what David was saying.
Especially then the New Testament makes sense. It's like, wow, the New Testament is not making stuff up about Jesus. It's getting it straight from the Old Testament. When you learn how to read what's in your Old Testament through these supernatural lenses of the divine counsel and the angel of the Lord, all of a sudden you're like, wow, I totally get what they were doing. And I understand why all these people actually believe that Jesus is the fulfillment of not just prophecy, but he's the actual person in the Old Testament who's now incarnated with us. That's the claim. And so, I think a lot of people miss that hardcore piece of what that claim is, but that ties the two testaments together in ways I've never could imagine.
When I was thinking, just processing and thinking stuff, but so we've covered before about how, and so going back to what you said even earlier, but then you bring it back in, that I think I'm right, like all the other cultures, the other, in the ancient Near East, they had this idea of the Most High God, like you said, El,
right,
and the Canaanite.
Right.
And so, and then this is, so like Jesus being the Son of the Most High, is part of that connection because that's what he's recognized at, or at least even, I think even in the New Testament, like demons even recognize him as the Son of the Most High.
Yeah, that's right. They knew who he was.
And so, especially when he was outside, I think, Israelite territory there. I don't know. I'm just making those connections now.
That's a great connection there, Adam, because actually in Deuteronomy 32:7, it says, remember when the Most High gave. So it's actually used that title. And even in Psalm 82, it says, I said you are gods, sons of the Most High. So it's using that language almost all the time that you find the divine counsel anywhere near it.
Yes.
That's not a coincidence.
Yeah.
That's incredible because I think before really understanding this, I just kind of skipped over those things and didn't really make those connections. But now really understanding this, I'm like, wow, they're saying it this way for a reason. And it's really, really fascinating. It's really a lot of fun.
When you talked about how, so you might have already said this, but I'll ask anyways, but you talked about how this connects, how you see this in the life of Christ. So even going that direction, you shared a little bit on that, but is there other things that you see that really pop out in that connection and how it applies with his life and ministry?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Yeah, man, I wrote the whole book on it, so I could probably talk about that for the rest of your time if you want.
Yeah.
That'd be
Whenever
great.
you see a title like the name of the Lord, or the one that everybody knows, but they don't really recognize what they're looking at, is the word of the Lord.
Yeah.
So like there's a verse in Genesis 15:1 that says, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. And it's like, well, if you stop and think about that, words don't come in visions, they come audibly to ears. So how could that be?
Right.
Well, and when you keep reading the chapter, you find that Abram is having a face-to-face conversation with somebody who takes him outside of his tent, has him look at the stars, and then at the end of the chapter, he puts him into a trance or whatever, and then he walks through these pieces of the cut animal as he's cutting the covenant.
I remember that.
Well, what is that? It's not just words that you're hearing. It's the Son of God. He's called the Word. You know, almost every prophetic book begins, the word of the Lord came to so-and-so.
Yes.
And then throughout, I'm preaching through Ezekiel right now, and almost every single oracle begins, the word of the Lord came to me. Well, what is that? It's not just ears. It's not just you're hearing things. You got to really quick scramble to write it down.
Yeah.
It's that a person who's called the word of the Lord is present, and he's the one from the divine counsel who's bringing a person, the prophet, up into that realm so that they can hear this kind of legal oracle that they need to then declare. And that's where John gets it from. He's not just making it up, and he's not like writing against a bunch of Gnostics who don't like the word because it's physical.
Yeah.
This is deeply Old Testament stuff. And there's all kinds of titles that are associated with the angel. The name I told you is one of them.
Yeah.
The glory, the shepherd, the right arm, wisdom. There's all kinds of them.
I don't think I've made that connection. So,
No.
like, just saying, everybody knows John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And so John is even, you think that's what John is even referring to here when he's writing that?
Yeah, 100%. And, in fact, people read that verse, they read that whole section wrong. I'll take you through this real quick.
Yeah.
Because I know how I read it for years
Yeah.
and years. And, I went to school at a conservative Baptist school, got a Bible minor. So I took Bible classes. I did Denver Seminary, and I had all these people talk about the Gospel of John and how John is just writing to these late first century kind of proto-Gnostics or something, and that's what he's trying to do. And when I read Heiser, I was like, that's not what he's trying to do at all. And then I started following the footnote trail of who Heiser was reading. And there's a lot of literature out here that talks about this. But I just wanted to read verse 9 through, probably go through 14, I suppose. But the true light, which gives light to everyone. So light is another one of these terms. Was coming into the world. And then verse 10 says, he was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own people did not receive him. Now, the way I always read that was that, he came to the disciples.
Right.
He came to the Jewish people when he incarnated. That's not what it's talking about. It's talking about how he was in the world in the Old Testament. And the people... the world was made through him, but the world, so that goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden. The world did not know him. He came to his own people. Who's that? To the children of Abraham.
Mm-hmm.
His own people did not receive him. That's the entire Old Testament story, how they just kept rejecting him. But there were some who did. So to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, now there's that word name.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's a title given to the angel. He gave the right to become children of God. So this is all Old Testament language. And then verse 14, this is how you know what it's talking about, because verse 14 tells you, and the word became flesh, which means everything before that happened before he became flesh.
Yeah.
Right? How could I have missed this
I
for
know.
50 years of my life?
Okay, so
And we have,
oh, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, he dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory. And that's the Shekinah. That's another one of these titles that's given to the angel, but now it's given to Jesus as he incarnates in this tent of human flesh.
Wow, that's amazing. So in the Old Testament, he wasn't showing up in the flesh, is what you're saying? Like,
Not
I'm trying
in
to
human flesh,
understand.
no. Yeah, no. There's a big distinction between what an angel is and what humans are. There's an overlap between us, so they look similar. Remember the guys at the tomb of Jesus? They call him a man, but he's clearly not a human. It's some kind of an angel, which is why the Gospels, some say man, some say angel. You think about like the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, where it says two angels came to the city, but then halfway through they're called men. Well, they're not ever called humans, and they're not ever given the word Adam, but they're given a different word in Hebrew that humans also have. So we share something with them, but then we don't share something. They are never, ever, ever called humans, but they are called men. They're called Ish, and humans are called Ish and Adam, but they're never called Adam. So did he come as a human? No, he came as an angel man,
Right.
and he walked and he looked kind of like us, I guess. I mean, I've never seen an angel.
Right.
I know how they're described by
That you
others,
know of.
but that I know of, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. We'll entertain angels
Exactly.
unawares, right? So if I have, I didn't recognize the difference, but they're like us, but they're not us. So was Jesus when he was walking around, they knew who he was. He's called the angel of the Lord. He's like, I'm the one who covenanted with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Judges chapter 2, he's very angry because the people have rejected him as their God. So yeah, there's a whole theology of the angel that basically he's the head of the divine council. Him and the Father both, but yeah, big topic there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and it makes these connections that I had. I mean,
No, I had
Because-
never made before.
I mean, because we talk about it where, that Jesus is the Word, but, and when is the Word, and the Word, like these discussions, but but just thinking of I don't think I've ever made that connection to that in the Old Testament.
No. And I'm not going to read John the same again for the Old Testament because
See these things pop up.
right now we're making these connections, which is incredible. So, speaking of Jesus, how can we understand Jesus's life? Now that we're talking about all of these things, and how can we think of it differently now? Because now we're going to be reading John differently. We'll probably read the Gospels differently. So, what are some of the things that we can?
Oh yeah,
Or like what he came
Well,
to do,
yeah.
or things like that. Yeah.
yeah. Well, there's a couple things. The first one, I guess, is that especially in John's Gospel, you see in the others too, but in different ways.
Yeah.
John is constantly using these Old Testament titles for the angel of the Lord to say that Jesus is the one who is now embodying them in human flesh. So he is the God of the Old Testament that they rejected, who is now here as one of us. And so you have to accept him. This is what the promises of Messiah were always about. Some of you understood this, some of you didn't, but I'm here to tell you that we walked with him for 3.5 years and we know who he is.
Right.
And so those are the connections that are really good for apologetics, I think, because they tie the two main characters of the Testaments, Jesus and the angel, together into one person,
Yeah.
and both the second person of the Trinity. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing would just be the incarnation itself. So something had to happen that couldn't happen when he was an angel, which is that he came to die for humans.
Right.
He didn't come to die for angels, and angels couldn't do the things that needed to be done in order for the redemption of the sons of Adam to occur.
Right.
And so Jesus had to incarnate and to become fully human in order to die for humans as a human, in order to take human sin upon himself as a human, in order to be the second Adam, that Paul calls him.
Right. That's good.
Wow.
Like, and I'm thinking, I'm sorry, I'm still processing stuff as you're talking here, but
Yeah.
I was thinking, so as you were talking about Jesus being here, and then I was thinking of, I think I know this, but in the Holy of Holies, that's where Yahweh dwelt. So that's the presence of God. And even through the Old Testament, Yahweh would be like in the temple, like his presence, or he would not dwell, but that's where he would come down, right? His presence. And then,
Let me stop you right there, Adam.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
because there's a lot to unpack, even what you just said there. The word presence is the word panim in Hebrew, and sometimes it's translated as the face of God. This is what Moses wants to see. I want to see your face. A lot of times it's not even translated, which is really crazy. In fact, in the main passage in Exodus about the angel of the Lord, it's chapter 23 and like verses 19, 20, somewhere on there. I'll call those up. Verse 20 and 21. Behold, I send an angel before you. And I forget exactly where it is because I only have my English up here, but I think it might even be right there, before your face, to guard you on the way, to bring you to the place that I have prepared. Now listen to this. Here's a good one. Pay careful attention to him and obey his voice. And do not rebel against him, for he will not pardon your transgression. For my name is in him. Now remember in the Gospels where Jesus is forgiving sin and they get all mad at him for
Right.
blasphemy?
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, and who can forgive sin but God alone? Well, they know the answer. The answer is that the angel of God can forgive sin because it's right there in their text.
Oh, wow.
And so what's happening there is that Jesus is claiming to be the same person. And they knew that. And it made him so furious because it's like, this is not possible. This is not what we expected to happen. And so, the hardness of their heart caused them to reject him in the new covenant, just like they did in the old covenant.
Yeah.
But this is one of those passages that has the presence of God a couple of times in the Hebrew. And So when you think of Yahweh sitting on the throne in the glory, surrounded by the glory in the tabernacle, on the throne, on the mercy seat, who is that? Well, it's not God in his bare essence. I don't even know what that would mean.
Right.
It's the person of the angel surrounded by the presence of the Holy Spirit is really what it is. Because he's the God of Israel. He's the king.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And this gets back to the divine council stuff, because this is what the sons of God were. They're the ones who ruled over the nations. And Yahweh is the one who rules over this nation. He's called Yahweh. That's another one of his names. So there's more than one Yahweh in the Old Testament, but there's only one God. And they both share the same essence. They are the one true God, but they're distinct because there's a Father and there's a Son. There's the Most High in Deuteronomy 32:7.
Yeah.
And then there's Yahweh in Deuteronomy 32:9, which says that Yahweh inherits Israel. Well, wait, that sons are the only people that inherit things. So Yahweh, there has to be the Son who's inheriting Israel.
Yeah, because it says that's his portion, his inheritance.
That's his portion. It's exactly what the language says.
His
so
inheritance.
And there you have the Son of God and the sons of God side by side. And all Psalm 82 that we kind of started this with is parsing out how the created sons of God were evil and how he's the one who has obeyed and done everything he's supposed to do in the old covenant. And then he's also the one who does it all in the new covenant. It's one of the reasons why his perfect works and righteousness is so very important, because the only way that the Son of God could inherit what he received in terms of the promise of all the nations is if he fully carries out God's law and perfectly obeys according to it, which the other sons of God did not do. So this is why I've done all these good works. For which one of these good works are you going to stone me? No, like, we're not going to stone you for that. We're going to stone you because you called yourself,
Right.
You made yourself equal with the Father.
Well, he is.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So he would be he is the non-created Son of God, I guess, is what we're saying with that connection. So you have the sons of God, the angelicos, who were created, and Jesus is the forever existing. I guess is that the connection I'm making, correct?
Yeah. Remember your Colossians 1:16. Listen to how some of these same titles that we've said already.
Yeah.
He's the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible. And then it mentions thrones, dominions, rulers, authorities in heaven and on earth. Well, those titles, thrones, just take thrones as an example. Where does that title come from? Well, it comes from a divine council scene in Daniel chapter 7, when Daniel says, I saw thrones, and there were many thrones in heaven, and I saw the Ancient of Days, and he took his place on the throne, at the head of the council kind of thing. And then I saw one like the Son of Man come before the Ancient of Days to receive his kingdom. Well, those thrones there are the thrones of the divine council. Colossians 1:16 is claiming that Jesus created all of those. And then he's given the title Son of God, the firstborn from the dead, in that very chapter. So it's not coincidental that Jesus is called the Son in a very passage that talks about these other entities.
Well, it's also, too, saying that, yes, he's a son of God, but he is definitely not like these others. Like, he is unique and distinct and different, and everything comes through him, which is completely fascinating.
Well, and even that, so now it's just got me thinking, but so when we say the only begotten Son of God, we hear that word, right? Where does that tie in your thought process?
So here's just my take on it.
Yeah.
We've done quite a bit of study on that word. I actually think that the word is doing triple duty on deliberately. It's like a triple entendre. And so I think it plays off of the word begotten. It plays off of the word unique. So for example, Isaac is called the only begotten, same word, son of Abraham. It's the only other time that it's really used in the New Testament of anyone other than Jesus. So what would it mean that he's the only begotten? It doesn't mean he's the only son because Abraham already had Ishmael. So it can't be mean in that instance, it can't mean he's the only son. It means he's somehow unique. And obviously he's unique because he was born of a miracle because Sarah's womb was dead, right?
Yeah.
So, and then it also plays off the word beloved. So when the father says, "This is my beloved son," these are word plays that you find going on in the Septuagint whenever these words in the Greek translation of the Hebrew are showing up. And so I think that you have all three ideas. He's the only begotten, he's the unique son, and he's the beloved son. And I could talk for a long time about both those, but I want to go to the Psalm 110 for a minute to show you the only begotten part.
Yeah.
This is really interesting. So, this is, I mentioned this verse earlier, verse 1. The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. And the New Testament uses this verse maybe more than any other in the entire scripture to talk about how Jesus is the second Lord. So it's essentially the Father says to the Son, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. Verse 3 in the Septuagint is wild. It's totally different from the Hebrew. You read the Hebrew, it says, your people will offer themselves freely on the day of your power in holy garments. From the womb of the morning, the dew of your youth will be yours. And you read that and you go, okay, that's pretty. But here's what it says in the Greek. With you is dominion in the day of your power, in the splendors of your saints. I have begotten you from the womb before the morning star.
Whoa.
Totally different. What does that mean, before the morning star? Well, it's a way of saying that you were around before Lucifer was created.
Yeah.
Wow.
And of course, that's Psalm 2 language as well, right? This is my son, today I have begotten you. Ask of me and I will make the nations your inheritance. And that's what happens in Psalm 82, is that he receives the inheritance of the nations.
Do you think like David understood all the stuff that he was writing?
That was exactly my
like
question.
The Spirit like revealing stuff to him that he's like,
I believe that he knew a lot more and believed and understood a lot more than we give him credit for.
Yeah.
It's not an accident. Like, this was funny. I was having this conversation with AI. It was like a 3-hour conversation and I could not break it. And it was taking the kind of the classic evangelical hermeneutic that you will find people saying. And hermeneutics are just, how do we interpret the Bible?
Right.
And it was basically saying, look, the New Testament has a right to create new meaning that was never there when it's talking about Jesus because it's inspired. Well, I grew up under that hermeneutic.
Right.
I've always found it nonsensical because this hermeneutic was how the New Testament was arguing to Jews that Jesus is the Messiah. So what kind of an argument is it to go to them and say, well, I know what it used to say, but here's what it means now. They would laugh you out of the synagogue if you did that.
Yeah.
But if this is something that was always present in the text, I'm not saying that he understood the fullness of it. Of course not. That no doubt. But did David know that he had two lords? Yeah, this wasn't a slip of the pen. How could he have known that? Well, it's because the Old Testament, the Torah, just as a base itself, distinguishes father and son in many places. You have two Yahwehs. You have an angel you have someone speaking as God for an angel who forgives sins. How can that possibly be? You have this angel character who Jacob says is literally his God. You have this word of God walking in the midst of Abraham, who he sees with his eyes.
Yeah.
And so did David know that the Lord was his shepherd, is actually referring to the angel? My question is, how could he have not known that?
Yeah. Wow. I mean, because it feels intentional. Like, now that you're explaining it this way and making the connections between the Old Testament and the New Testament, it does feel intentional. So it does feel like, like this was something that was known. And so, which is pretty incredible
Well, even
because we've
during
lost all that.
Well, even during, so you can move up all the way to the disciples, to the authors of, the New Testament. And this is stuff that I'm assuming they knew they had these connections that we didn't have. Is that what?
Well, I think that they knew. I think they got the connections after the resurrection.
Oh,
I think
yeah.
these things
Maybe
are
they were missing it.
I think that they, for the most part, I don't know that they always missed it because, you'll get them confessing that Jesus is God before he dies. But it's after the resurrection when he gives them this hermeneutic in Luke 24, right? Where he says the guys on the road to Emmaus and they're all sad because they've completely missed it. And they thought he was something that he's not. Now he's dead. And then he shows up as resurrected. He unveils who he is. And then he gives them a hermeneutic. He says, look, why were you so slow to understand that everything about the scripture and then the law, the prophets, the Psalms is about me? And I think that, again, this is kind of the way I grew up. Oh, well, that talks about the prophecies.
Right.
And then that's it.
Right.
And I'm like, no, this side of understanding this worldview, that's only the tiniest bit of it.
Yeah.
It's actually that the whole text is literally him as the God of Israel. And he's trying to show them that this is the way it always was. And when I was using all this terminology, that was me. I was telling you that I'm him.
Yeah.
I'm the same person and the same person of the Godhead. And now I've proven it to you because I rose from the dead, just like I told you I would, because the scripture told you that I would.
Right.
Wow.
I think how I've always, when I've read the Old Testament, New Testament, whenever I'm reading the Old Testament, I'm always thinking like I'm reading, I'm reading about the Father, and that's kind of it. And then all of a sudden, and sometimes, what do they call Christophanies? I forgot what they're called. But when Christ shows up on the scene every once in a while, and it's like, maybe this was Christ as in this person or whatever, in a couple of different times. But I've never really made the connection of understanding that Christ, that the Son, was completely present and active during all this time during the Old Testament. And so
it makes me think of, because this is one thing that I've never really understood, is Melchizedek. So is that part of?
Yeah, I mean, that's the next verse in Psalm 110, isn't it? So right after verse 3, verse 4 is, the Lord has sworn he will not change his mind. You are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. Who is the you? Well, it has to be the second Lord of the verse 1. And a lot of people don't get this. And this is kind of stuff that you might not, there's reasons why you wouldn't get it. At the Dead Sea, the people at Qumran had a whole bunch of Melchizedekian literature. And they have all kinds of texts that talk about how Melchizedek was essentially a heavenly being. And there are passages, like, for example, I think it's Isaiah 61, where this is the passage Jesus quotes in the synagogue right after in Luke 4, right after he's in the temptation in the wilderness, and he makes it through, and he goes into his synagogue in Nazareth, and then they kick him out, and try to push him off the cliff.
Yeah.
Well, it's because he read this: "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor." Well, the Dead Sea Scrolls and they replace Melchizedek with Yahweh there. That's crazy.
Oh.
Whoa.
Why would you do that?
Yeah.
Well, it's because they were making these connections that essentially Melchizedek is just another title for the same person, the second person. So when you read Hebrews, that gives you all this language of how Melchizedek is eternal. He without beginning or end of days. He has no genealogy. He has no father or mother. We try and explain that away. But there was actually entire groups of Jews that were like, no, that's exactly right. It's because he wasn't human. So then you go back, and if you read that story with Abraham, right? And the only place you really find the story, all the name means is king of righteousness, Melchizedek.
Yeah.
And that's all it is. It's a title. He's the king of righteousness. Well, who's the king of righteousness? That's Jesus. And what does Abraham do? He gives him a tenth of everything he has. Well, who do you give a tenth to in the Torah? You always give it to the Lord because he's the high king, right? So I think that this psalm is the early. I know that the early church was using almost every one of these verses of the 4 verses to prove that Jesus is the fulfillment of the psalm, not just the first verse, but they were using that 3rd verse too in the Septuagint. And they were using the 4th verse, which I think is exactly what Hebrews is doing.
Yeah.
Wow, that makes so much more sense because it's always been so confusing, to me at least. Because, I never really understood it, but that makes complete... And I guess, like you said, I would not have made that connection had...
Yeah, unless you know the history that other people actually thought that about Melchizedek, then you what you're going to do is you're going to find a way to explain away the language of Hebrews and just make it ordinary. Well, it doesn't really mean that. I remember people saying that. Well, the reason why he says he doesn't have a genealogy is because we don't have a record of his genealogy. Like that's a pretty. When you stop thinking about it, I'm like, that's actually doesn't even make any sense of what he's saying at all.
Yeah. Wow. Well, is there anything else about the divine council that you think deserves more attention that other people might not be aware of?
Oh yeah, I mean we really haven't even touched the divine council stuff too much, other than Jesus as
huge,
being kind of the head of the council.
Yeah,
but it's important that people understand. We have circled around this a little bit that there's a group of beings that God placed as punishment. By the way, this was not a blessing. It was part of the punishment of the Tower of Babel. That's what Moses is getting at. When he places these entities over the nations, it was because this is what they wanted. And what's the Tower of Babel all about? It's about building our way back up to heaven by building a giant cosmic mountain and then trying to call the gods down. God is the one who comes on mountains himself. You don't get to choose where he does that.
Yeah.
He comes on Ararat. He comes on Sinai. He comes on Mount Zion. He comes on Mount Calvary. He's the one who chooses where he's going to come on a mountain. But these people, they decided we're going to try and call the gods down. And so God says, fine, if that's what you want, you can have each other. That's essentially Heiser's language. Right. It's like you were made for each other. So I will give you to the nations and I will give the nations to you, and we'll see how that works out for you. And so the point being, though, that they were given rules. They were supposed to lead these people to the truth of the Lord, and they didn't do it. Not only did they not do that, they took worship to themselves. And this is where you get the myths of all the nations. That's why they're worshipped, because they're incredibly powerful, and they did not deflect that worship away. Like, in the Bible, what does an angel do? A good angel, it says, don't worship me. I'm just a creation like you. Worship God. That's not what these guys did. They took the worship to themselves because they're fallen and they're evil. And so, but they still I think still do have some sort of a rule over the nations. But that rule has been greatly diminished, at least legally speaking, because Jesus conquered them at the cross. Right. And that's what, Colossians, 2:15 or whatever, that says that if they would have known what was going to happen to them, they never would have put to death the Lord of glory, because it was through his humility and his death, his descent into hell, his proclamation that he's the king, is emptying out Abraham's bosom, his rising from the dead, being victorious over the grave, that became, as it was cut in his blood, the covenant that was cut there, that became the legal means by which they would be disinherited, according to Psalm 82. So do they still have power today? I think they do, but their legal authority to keep people in bondage of their sin and in darkness has been stripped from them.
Right.
And that's really what Paul is getting at in Athens. Remember at his great speech when he says that people are groping about in darkness, not realizing that God is near to each one of us?
Yeah.
Where does that come from? If you read the language, it's coming straight from that Deuteronomy 32 verse 8 language, where they were given over to this darkness. And now I'm here to tell you that there's a man who has come, who has undone what our fathers and these other fallen angels have done. And there's a day where God is going to judge every person, and he demands that you repent, and not in some kind of a horrible way, but because he's provided a way for you to have salvation.
Yeah.
And to be freed from the language of the New Testament is always like slavery to sin, or the kingdom of darkness, or what children of disobedience, children of the kingdom of darkness, slaves of Satan. Like, we're born into that kingdom, and that comes from this whole worldview. And Jesus sets us free from that when we trust in him by faith alone.
Yeah, that's good. I want to keep going that way, but I had a question about something. It made me think about something that I wanted to ask when we were talking about. So the Deuteronomy 32, when God divided the nations and he put a son of God over each one. By the time we get to Christ and the temptation of Christ, Satan says something like, bow down, worship me. All these have been
given to me.
And I can give
the
them
kingdoms of the world,
to me. I give them to who I will. Or something like that. That's just my paraphrase. But did something happen in between, like when it all started off and he separated them? I know it was punishment and judgment, but I'm assuming they all started off good, let's say, and then eventually over time were not. And then did Satan eventually
infiltrate somehow,
or get them to turn somehow, or give everything to him? I don't know if you even have an answer for that, but
yeah. So here's my speculation. I think I can back it up. I have a paper on the internet on academia.com that kind of argues this, so people can go and read it. It's called something like Satan, Baal, Zeus, and something like that. I forget, but just type those in, it'll come up. And my view is this, that remember when Jesus is casting out all these evil spirits, and the Pharisees say it's by the power of Beelzebub that you do this?
Yeah.
Well, that's Baal, Zebul, and Zebul's, we don't know exactly what that means. It could mean Lord of the Flies or Lord of the House, but the key there is the word Baal. Baal's the guy in the Old Testament. Well, Jesus immediately then says, how can Satan cast out Satan? So he identifies Baal with Satan directly. Baal is Satan. Now, the second connection is in Revelation chapter 2, I think like around verse 13. This is Jesus talking to the church at Pergamum, and he says, I know where you live, where Satan's throne is. And you're like, well, what does that mean? Satan's throne. Well, it seems to refer to something that's no longer in Pergamum, because the Nazis took it out of Pergamum and put it in Berlin. And it was a giant altar to Zeus. And so that's a connection that links Zeus to Satan.
Zeus and Baal and Satan are.
And the Baal Zeus thing is the strongest of all, because they are the same deity, just transferred from the ancient Near East to Greece.
Okay.
Like a different name.
They're both the storm god and lightning god. That's what they are. So in my theory is that Satan is Zeus, is Baal. Same thing.
Okay.
Now, of course, when Rome took Greece over, they took over Zeus and he becomes Jupiter. Same thing.
Okay.
So now you have to start thinking a little bit more cosmic geography and world empire stuff. Who's the world empire in the days of Jacob and Joseph? Well, it's Egypt. Who's the world empire in the days of Isaiah? It's Assyria. Who's the world empire in the days of Ezekiel? It's Babylon. Who's the world empire in the days of Jesus? It's Rome.
Right.
Okay, if Satan is Jupiter, and Rome is the world empire, then Satan is the one who rules the world at that point in time, because he's over that empire.
That makes sense.
So I actually think that you could probably say that in the Old Testament, Baal, Satan, was probably more of a localized deity, that others might have had more power out farther east than him. But by the time of Greece and Rome, he ascends a top dog, the way that empires rise and fall. And so the reason why he can offer Jesus all the kingdoms of the world is because quite literally, he had won them through the earthly mirror on earth through his armies with Greece and Rome.
Wow.
He had conquered them. So I actually think that you find this idea of diminishing portions and increasing portions according to the way that nations rule. And in fact, Ezekiel says that with Israel. He goes, I'm going to diminish your portion in chapter 16, Israel, because of how evil you were.
Yeah.
I'm going to take it away from you. So these portions are not like fixed. They can move. They can expand. And remember when Jesus says, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven?
Yes.
When was that?
That was after the 72, or that he sends out the 72.
It was right after he sends out the 70. That's not a coincidence, right?
Yeah.
And when does that happen? Well, it's right after the Mount of Transfiguration.
Yeah.
I did a whole Blurry Creatures on this. You guys can go listen to that. But it's a super interesting because that's the same mountain Jesus is transfigured on that Satan offers him all the kingdoms of the world. It's temptation. It's Mount Hermon.
Yeah. We actually, yesterday we're recording an episode on Mount Hermon.
Yeah, funny enough.
A couple of days where we talked about the gates of hell and the transfiguration, but I didn't make the connection that, so you're also saying that's where the temptation, where
that's where that part of the temptation was when he takes him to a high mountain. He goes up on the top of Mount Hermon, and that was actually a divine council mountain. So this is one more thing to talk about with the council is they meet on a mountain, cosmic mountain, and the easiest way you can conceive of this is Mount Olympus. That's where the Greek gods met, right?
Yeah.
So we have that worldview in our head, and we know that God comes down and meets with his representative on top of mountains all the time.
Yeah.
And then from there, the information's disseminated to the people. So where does the law come when God gives it to Moses? It comes on the top of the mountain. And there's myriads and myriads of angels that are there, according to Deuteronomy 33:2, because it's a divine council scene. So then he takes the law, which was put into effect through angels, Acts says and Hebrews says, and then it gets disseminated to the people. So on top of this mountain, you have this divine council stuff happening. So back to Mount Hermon, this was the place that the Canaanites believed was the mountain of El. And they had a story called, I forget what we call it. I think we call it the Baal cycle. And in the Baal cycle, it's a story of how Baal becomes the high god of that area. And what happens is he has a brother, his name is Yam. Yam is the sea. He's the equal of Neptune or Poseidon. They're the same. They're all the same god. And this is really wild because in this story, El is going to make Yam the high god. And so he goes, "You are my beloved son, Yam, my beloved son." And where would he say that? He would say it on Mount Hermon. And in this Baal cycle, this infuriates Baal, who wants to be the beloved son, and he doesn't get to be it. And so he essentially falls like lightning from heaven, and that's not the language it uses, but essentially you get the picture. He gets furious. He goes to another god who makes him a couple magic weapons, and he kills his brother. And then he becomes the top god of all the sons of God. That's how Baal wins. And then so all this happens right there. What does the Father say to Jesus?
That's exactly what he said.
You're my. That's exactly what he said. He's not saying to Yam. He says it to Jesus. Right. You are my beloved son. So it's a replay of that story. And then what happens? I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. Yeah. That's not talking about the primordial fall of Satan. It's talking about a rage. He's furious, and now he's going to go find a way to kill him. Just like what happened in the other story. And that's exactly what happens.
Whoa.
But of course, the Bible flips it and inverts it, because when you kill this beloved son, it's going to be your undoing.
Wow.
That's right.
Wow. I get super genius level storytelling.
Yeah.
Yeah. The parallels are insane. This is just blowing my mind. Oh, wow.
So Satan is now he would have been one of the original, but going back to that question and connecting all this, Satan would have been one of the original sons of God that was put over a nation.
Over the nations, yeah, I think
And through conquering, ultimately, with his bell, he gained territory. So by the time of Christ, through earthly conquerors and empires, he would have been, that's how he would have inherited all that.
Yeah.
And then eventually, even through the time of Paul's now talking about how he's the God of this world. So
and that's why he's the God of this world, because the Roman Empire is the empire of this world.
Yeah.
So as we kind of even looking into bringing that, I guess, to present, what does that look like?
I'm not 100% sure on this, Adam. It's kind of tricky.
Yeah.
But my best guess is that it's interesting that the Roman Empire never actually split up. It never got conquered. It was only defeated from within.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Satan still has some kind of authority that parallels what he had in the New Testament. There's probably other entities that are vying for power as well, but I don't know how that works.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do think my view is that I hold to the present binding of Satan.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I hold that view is because when you read Revelation 20 and in parallel with chapter 12, it's the same thing for several different reasons, but a main one is that Satan's called the same four things in both places. It's identical language. In chapter 12, it's the battle of Michael versus the dragon. In chapter 20, it's the binding of Satan. And, I grew up, again, the very different way of thinking about it, that when Satan is bound, he's thrown into the bottom of hell and he can't do anything at all to anybody ever.
Right.
And so, but that's not what the text says.
Mm-hmm.
It says that he's bound so that he may no longer deceive the nations.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing that's the caveat there.
Yeah.
And what's so cool about it is that when you understand that the binding of Satan took place at the cross and Pentecost, that time frame, that's exactly what we've been seeing ever since.
Yeah.
He doesn't deceive the nations anymore. That's the whole reason acts can happen. It couldn't happen in the old covenant, because in order for somebody to become a believer in Yahweh, they had to become an Israelite.
Right.
Or at least they had to, like Naaman, they had to go and come to Israel, be cleaned, and then take away some of the dirt of Israel and put it in their territory, because that's Yahweh's dirt, right?
Naaman, yeah.
Heiser talks about that one, but this demonstrates that the binding of Satan is real, because the nations are no longer being deceived. You guys are missionaries in a place that proves it.
Yeah.
And the fact that likely none of the three of us are Jews also proves it.
So then, even so, coming into like application and our calling and, of going out, making disciples, and as Paul says, our fight is not against flesh and blood, and these type of things we're coming up against. How do you talk to people or communicate to people? Like, how does this view and all this stuff impact our calling to go out and make disciples?
Well, I mean, I suppose there's lots and lots of ways, but the number one thing is that if our true enemy is not humans, then we need to stop acting like it is humans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The people that aren't believers are not our enemies. They're people that are in another kingdom, and they need to be rescued from it.
Yes.
So our true enemy is the enemy that holds people under the power of Satan. And, it should give you a little bit different reaction to when people act totally evil against you.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Against others, that they're just doing what their master tells them to do because they're slaves.
Right.
Yeah.
And
that's right.
so it should also give us, I think, an immense desire to proclaim the gospel, because you can't just take somebody out of Satan's kingdom. You're not strong enough to do that. And they're not strong enough to do that themselves.
Mm-hmm.
There's only one power in this world that can take somebody out of a kingdom and put them into another one, and that's the power of the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
And that's Romans, right?
Yeah.
I'm not ashamed of the gospel, because it is the power of God for salvation. There is a message that we have that when the living God attaches the life of the Spirit to it by the power of the Word of the Son of God, that message itself takes people out of that kingdom. And so therefore, if we want to have any ability to fight the war, we have to be proclaiming the gospel. We have to know what the gospel is. We have to know the only thing that will bring people to an end of themselves is the power of the law.
Right.
And we can't use the law to try and drive people to get out of that kingdom, because the law doesn't have any power to do anything except for either puff you up or cause you to utterly despair because you can't keep it.
Right.
And that, again, that's the power of the gospel, because the law has been kept by the lawkeeper, by Jesus. And it doesn't mean God doesn't care about how we live our lives. He does, but that's not what converts people. And frankly, it's not the power that sanctifies them either.
Yeah.
It's the gospel alone, the free grace of God, that he always forgives us of our sins in Christ, because he has made us to be sons of God. He has brought us into that family.
Right.
And as part of that family, Paul says eventually, don't you know that you will judge angels? Why are you acting this way towards one another?
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's so true. Thank you so much for saying that.
Yeah, we make that emphasis a lot.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the ways that the enemy deceives us now is we think other people or other things going on or things that, aren't Christian, those people are our enemies. And
not true.
I think, he's just behind the scene going, haha. Like,
right.
I've got you going after the people you're supposed to be
loving
and proclaiming the gospel to, and the gospel of the kingdom too. And so I 100% agree with that. I think that's a huge thing. So
yes, thanks for sharing that. And I have one final question for you. How has this whole worldview changed or impacted your life and the way you see the world and the way you respond as a follower of Christ?
Such a good question. I would say that it hasn't changed anything that I believed in terms of like essentials of my faith. It's not an attack on any of those things. And what it's done has turned my world from black and white into color. It's made it from 2-dimension to 3-dimension. It's allowed me to connect the testaments that I grew up not understanding. How do you connect these things? I thought that there's one word of God, but so many Christians act like there's 2 words of God. Sometimes they even act like there's 2 different gods. They're so disparate from each other, right?
Yeah.
So it connects these things and I guess the main thing it does in doing this is it shows that Jesus is the God of the Bible from the Garden of Eden all the way to the end of Revelation, where you get back to the Garden of Eden because he is the way to the tree of life. So, I mean, I can't even begin to tell you all the millions of things that this impacts in the way that I think about stuff.
Yeah.
But that's how I see the change. It's not a fundamental difference. I knew what the gospel was before any of this stuff. But I just have a way of explaining it in my mind and hopefully to other people that will help them kind of connect dots that they never have before. And it creates such an excitement for faith, at least in my life, that, hopefully it just becomes contagious.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. I feel like you've impacted us. And so, yeah, that hope that you have it's actually happening because we're a product of all of the things that you've researched and you can tell that you're really passionate about the Lord and just finding truth and making those connections for people. So I just want to say thank you for that. And thank you so much for just talking to us today. This was such an honor. It was a lot of fun.
Before we end up, can you share a little bit about how people can find you online and connect with your works and your books? And
yeah, sure. So first it would be our church website. Our church is called the Reformed Baptist Church of Northern Colorado. And so our website is those initials, rbcnc.com. Basically, I preach the books of the Bible. So ever since 2008 or 7, if I preached on a passage that's weird, I'm going to talk about it. All of those are up. You can listen to them on our website on audio, and many of them have PDFs. I write out my sermons like the old Puritans used to do. So like they're pretty detailed, but it becomes a pretty valuable resource, and that's all obviously free for people. You can go to my personal website, dougvandorn.com. just to kind of see stuff I'm doing or that I'm interested in. And those are probably the two main things. Anybody who might be interested in some of the Reformed world and also the weird stuff, I have a site where we can talk about this stuff behind a paywall so that you don't have trolls and stuff. And that's the name of my podcast is Reformed Fringe, the Reformed Fringe. So reformedfringe.com, people can come and check us out there if that's something they might like to be able to chat with people about. We have a couple hundred and more people that are in there now, and it's a super fun place to be. We get to talk about this stuff all the time.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
When I saw too, a quick, I think you posted a couple days ago on Facebook that you're launching something new with Luke and Nate, Blurry Theology, something like that.
Yeah, that's called Stranger Theology. That's Joel Matamale is putting together this. He's working with Luke and Nate on that, and I'm going to be a contributing writer to it.
That's so cool.
So yeah,
that's great.
I think I have like 6 essays that I need to get out next year for it, and then he's got other scholars and stuff that are also working with him, and I think they have big plans for this.
That's so cool.
And so just those are on, the heck is the name of that site? I should know. But I don't know off the top of my head. But people can go and look up Joel Matamale and Stranger Things, I guess.
Okay. Awesome.
To find out more about that.
That's great.
Awesome. Well, Doug, thank you so much again for joining us today.
Yeah.
This is an honor for us to have you on with us today, and hopefully we can have you back. There's so much you've done that we haven't been talking about, and I think one of the most amazing things is the whole Serpent Mound discovery and that you did and about Hermon. There's so much. I'm just like, what do we talk about? So hopefully we can have you back on again. We'd love that. But thank you so much for spending time just with us today. For our viewers out there, thank y'all for joining us today, and please like and share and subscribe. That helps us out. Share this with your friends and family, and we appreciate y'all being here, and we will see y'all next time.
Yep, see ya.